Dawn doesn't break slowly in the South China Sea. It snaps. Pink light hits steel. Haze lifts off the water. And suddenly the horizon isn't empty anymore. Just days ago, a U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyer looked up and realized 3 Chinese warships had appeared out of nowhere. Not on radar 5 minutes earlier. Not in the predicted patrol lanes. Not broadcasting anything. 3 gray hulls. 3 converging angles. 1 American ship dead center. The trap wasn't theory anymore. It was geometry. And the captain had seconds to decide whether this was harassment or the first move toward something far uglier. Here's what most people don't understand. These encounters don't happen at high speed. They happen in slow motion, like 2 cars drifting toward the same intersection, knowing neither has the right of way, and both refuse to stop. The U.S. destroyer was conducting what the Navy calls a presence patrol near one of the most contested reefs in the South China Sea, an area China claims the Philippines disputes, and the U.S. refuses to recognize as anyone's property. Normally, these patrols are routine, but in the last 2 weeks, China's maritime forces have changed their posture. They've been approaching U.S. vessels more aggressively, more silently, and with a kind of coordinated timing that suggests rehearsal. This wasn't harassment, this was choreography. By the time the destroyer's captain stepped onto the bridge, the situation was already shifting. 2 Chinese hulls were approaching from the port side. A third, larger, slower, more deliberate, was moving in from starboard. The Americans weren't being followed, they were being framed. What China attempted is something their commanders have privately discussed for years. A tight box-in maneuver. It's not designed to ram. It's not designed to fire. It's designed to leave the U.S. captain with one of 2 choices. 1. Break course and look weak. 2. Hold course and risk collision. Either way, China wins a narrative. But here's the part almost nobody knows. A box-in doesn't start with ships. It starts with timing. The 2 portside ships, likely a Jiangdao corvette and a Type 056 lighter escort, were drifting inward at 5 to 7 knots, just slow enough to look unthreatening, but angled just right to cut the destroyer's forward escape vector. Meanwhile, the larger starboard vessel, probably a Type 05 2D platform based on hull silhouette, moved in with its bow pointed like a spear. 3 ships, 3 corners, and a U.S. destroyer in the geometric dead zone. On paper, this looks like a simple encirclement. In reality, it's a psychological vice, because when the distance drops below 1,000 yards, nobody is thinking globally. Nobody is thinking politics. Every instinct becomes primal. How close is too close? What's their actual intent? Is this the moment it all goes wrong? And then something else happened. Something the captain didn't expect. The Chinese ships went quiet. Not radio silent. They were already that. Engine silent. They dropped RPM just enough to make their wakes disappear, creating the illusion of still water, even as they continued inching closer. Ask anyone who stood on a destroyer bridge. It's not the ship you hear, it's the water it pushes. When that sound fades, you feel it in your bones. The U.S. Destroyer's Combat Information Center called out the closing distances. Port contacts at 1,400 yards. Starboard vessel at 1,200. CPA decreasing. CPA, closest point of approach. When that number shrinks, so does the margin between posturing and crisis. The captain stepped forward, hands behind his back, eyes forward. And here's what separates an ordinary officer from the kind of commander you want in a moment like this. He didn't blink. He didn't shift course. He didn't accelerate. He didn't broadcast a warning. He didn't waste time asking Beijing for intentions they were never going to state. He made himself unreadable, because in a close quarters box-in attempt, the first ship to show uncertainty loses leverage. And in the South China Sea, leverage is oxygen. Instead, the captain gave one quiet order: maintain course, maintain speed, log everything. Translation: if China wants to force a showdown, they'll have to cross the line their own commanders are terrified of crossing. And that's when the trap began to break. At exactly 900 yards, closer than most people can comprehend without seeing it, the U.S. destroyer made its move. Not with a turn, not with a burst of acceleration, not with weapons, with position. Destroyers have a trick that isn't in any official NATO playbook. They can make a small lateral shift that looks like nothing on radar, but feels like a seismic change on the water. It's called a vector denial adjustment. You drift 5 degrees off axis, 5 knots up. Your bow shifts by just a hair. To satellites, nothing. To pilots, nothing. To naval officers standing 800 yards away, staring through binoculars, it's a message, a warning, a line in the water, not spoken, not signaled, asserted. The U.S. destroyer executed that adjustment so smoothly that for a moment the Chinese ships hesitated. You could see it in their wakes. A ripple, a deviation, a break in the synchronized approach. The illusion of control slipped. Now they were in the decision vice. If they kept closing, they risked collision, a collision the world would blame on them. If they backed off, they admitted the trap failed. The Chinese starboard ship blinked first. A subtle head-on turn, a half-knot drop, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. But that was the moment the box cracked. The portside ships held position for another 30 seconds, then eased off too. 1 trap, 3 ships, 0 rams, 0 losses, 0 political detonations. The captain didn't beat the maneuver, he beat the intent behind it. If you think this was just another harassment attempt, you're missing the real story. Beijing has been probing U.S. resolve using tighter, riskier gray zone tactics. They're testing whether American commanders will break formation, break course, or break discipline under pressure. This time, they got their answer. But the real danger isn't in what happened, it's in what almost happened. A box-in attempt at 900 yards leaves no room for error. 1 crosswind, 1 misread intention, 1 officer having a bad day, and the entire region flips from tension to ignition. This time, the destroyer held the line. This time, the trap failed. This time, the Chinese ships blinked. But this wasn't the last rehearsal. And if you want to see the next pressure point, place where a confrontation like this could turn into the first real exchange of fire, watch the briefing on screen now. Because in the South China Sea, moments like this aren't random, they're warnings.